Behavior Subcommittee to order at 6:35 p.m.
And I'll call a roll.
Thank you, Gail. Can you call
Dr.
the roll?
Ammons,
Here.
Ms. Bishop,
Here.
Mr. Davis,
Here.
Dr. Starks Turner, Ms. Kraft,
Here.
Ms. Francois Blue,
Here.
Ms. Gabby Dunn,
Here.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, here.
Ms. Jones McLeod,
Cloud. Here.
Loud again, thank you.
That's okay.
Ms. Grimes,
Here.
Ms. Perellis,
Here.
Ms. Hardwick,
Here.
Ms. Harris,
Here.
Ms. Nitschke, Ms. McQueen, Dr. Moore, Ms. Stigger,
She's here.
she's here.
I saw her. Yeah.
Me too. There we go.
Okay. Dr. Pruitt-Adams,
Present.
Mr. Martin,
Here.
Dr. Sanders,
Here.
Ms. Dixon-Spivey,
Here.
Ms. Steffens, Mr. Wachsler.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
As permitted by Governor Pritzker's Executive Orders 2020-07 and 2020-33, the Oak Park and River Forest High School Board of Education, Cook County, Illinois, will convene a remote culture, climate, and behavior meeting on September, is today the 10th or the 9th, at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom. Any members and staff may participate in this meeting with the information below. The state of Illinois continues to operate under a disaster declaration related to the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic. Our schools have been closed since March 13, 2020, with very limited access by only employees who are performing essential duties. The health department continues to advise the community to practice social distancing, wear face masks, and avoid unnecessary contact with others. Based on the current public health concerns, I, Dr. Joylyn Pruitt-Adams, as head of the public body, do not believe that it is either practical or prudent to hold an in-person meeting of the Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee on September 9th, 2020. I further believe that it is neither practical nor prudent for the public to be present at the public body's regular meeting location. We will continue to hold a remote meeting with an updated practice that complies with Public Act 101-640 that was signed by Governor Pritzker on June 12, 2020. Pursuant to Public Law 101-640, since the meeting cannot be conducted at the regular physical location due to the health crisis, alternative arrangements have been made to allow any interested member of the public to hear all discussions, testimony, and roll calls as follows. Also, we will not have a chat box. Please do not use it.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. Now we'll have visitor comments. Gail, do we have any visitor comments?
We do not.
Okay, great. So we will move on the agenda to welcome and introduction. So first of all, welcome to my dining room, everyone. I'm very thrilled to have you all here. I would like to say first, thank you to everyone who's returning and thank you to everyone who's new this year. To say yes to being engaged in this work from in the midst of what we're dealing with in the world. In addition to our our work lives, our families, all of the things that you have going on. I have nothing but gratitude for your yes. This year will prove to be quite interesting, to say the least. And the work of the Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee really is foundational to providing input and feedback into what the board, some of the board decisions that get made, as well as some of the decisions made by the administration. So I really value and appreciate each and every one of you. I just wanted to start by saying that. I'm Gina Harris, in case I did not say that. And I chair this committee, and I'm just thrilled that you're all here. So we have been in the practice of as the high school is becoming more and more restorative every year. Last year and the year, I think the year before, Lincoln, correct me, you all correct me if I'm wrong, but we began all of our meetings by participating in Circle and by actually doing a restorative practice, which is community building by Circle together, so that we can form the kind of relationships that we need to have, so that we can do the kind of work that we need to do. There will be times that our conversations may be, I wouldn't say challenging, but definitely can get, we're going to be talking about race and our racial equity policy. We're going to be talking about the impact of systemic racism and white supremacy culture on our students. And we will be having conversations that might be difficult. So it's important for us to have the kind of relationships that we need to have, even as a large group, so that we can move the work forward in the ways that most impact the experience of our students. And as a graduate of OPRF HS, ninth class of 1988, I'm honored to hold this position and to be doing this work, but more so to be doing it with you in community, with community members, with students here. Thank you, students, so much. And our amazing staff at the high school. So there's a lot to be grateful for with us coming together, and a lot of work to do, especially amidst all that we're dealing with. So I want to move us into Circle first, and we'll do this virtually. And for those of you who have not participated in Circle, either virtual or in person, I'm going to go through a little bit of what our agreements will be. So I believe that, I don't know who's working the screen today. Can you put up the PowerPoint? Because I believe that Lincoln included the slides.
Hugo is working the screen.
Thank you. Hugo, can you put the slides up, please? So I'll tell you the three important pieces of us being in Circle. Foundational parts. One, well, there's four actually, if I include the fact that it's an indigenous practice dating back for many of our ancestors for many, many years, and we honor their presence, as well as the process that was created that includes everyone's voice, that we make decisions collectively. And the first important piece is that we are all at the same level. So although we're virtual tonight, and we are, and will likely be for a while, what we do in Circle practice, in everyone who walks into this space, all of your titles have been basically equalized. We're all at the same level. Everyone's voice is equally important. If we were in the same space, we would be sitting in a circle. The input and the value of each individual is critical. What you bring to this piece of work is important, and your voice is really, really important. The second part of Circle is that we use a talking piece. And how we're going to do virtual talking pieces, I will say, hey, Melanie, I just saw that you got here. I will call on each person as we go around the circle in this virtual format. And that will be, in essence, passing the talking piece. We've done a very cool thing in some of our classes, is we actually pass it to them on the camera. If you have a talking piece near you, feel free to do that. That makes sure that even if you pass and you don't have anything to say, that you know that your voice is important, that you know that your place, your presence counts, whether you say a word or not. And the third piece is that we have agreements. And those agreements, we've used the same agreements that we've used in a number of spaces in the high school. We used them for America to Me, but they work really well in almost every space because it gives us the ability to keep this space safe so that folks know that what they say here, although this is a public forum and you all did your Open Meetings Act training, but that we're making sure that we maintain some level of trust and confidentiality with each other around what we talk about, even though it's a public space, right? We have these agreements. I'm looking for the slides, but I don't see them yet.
Need to move on. You go to the next one.
It's the next one? Thank you. Yeah, because we're going to approve the minutes after this, right, Gail?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Thank you so much. So our goal here is to create a safe, brave space. Not safe that no one here has a right to comfort. I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but sometimes we're going to need to say things. You might be uncomfortable, and that's okay. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I'll go through these very briefly. The agreements are to stay engaged, to do our work, to not check out when the conversation gets tough, to speak our truth, right? Speak your truth from your heart. Not speaking on behalf, I don't speak on behalf of all Black women. I don't speak on behalf of all women. I only speak for me, and we will do our work to not assign that to anyone else as well, right? If anyone's speaking, they're not speaking for an entire group of people. Experience discomfort and connect with your feelings, because there will be emotions that come up whenever we talk about race. And so that's a normal aspect of our conversation. Connect with your feelings. Accept and expect non-closure. As much as I would love to say that this committee is going to solve all the things that need to be solved, the likelihood that we will have ongoing work is very good. Maintain confidentiality. I already talked about that. It's being recorded. It's a public forum. People are going to hear what you say. Move up and move back. For those of you who are like me, who tend to dominate the conversation, I do my work to move back, to leave space for others to speak. If you know that you're getting long-winded, I may at any point say, okay, we want to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, and I will cut you off in a very kind way. Listen resiliently, which means really, this is a practice. This is our practice in all the spaces that we're in now, I feel, in the world, but listening for understanding versus listening to respond. Because it's important to know that things will get said that may make us uncomfortable, but I still want to see we still want to be doing our work to see how we connect. Silence is okay. It's okay if you need to pass, if you don't have anything to add. Space for quiet is important. And the last one is to remember to breathe. If it gets tough, if someone says something that you disagree with, take a deep breath. So for those of you who are not engaged in restorative practices, that next slide is just really a piece from IIRP, the International Institute of Restorative Practices, that gives it a little bit of what restorative practices does. But the goal of our community building circle here is that every person in this group is seen, heard, understood, knows that they're respected and that they're valued. And perhaps we may grow to actually like each other, which is very likely considering this group already. So can we go to the next slide? Because I'm going to move us right into our question. I believe it is, yeah, because that next slide is Lincoln. So I want to move us into our question because some are new here on CCB and some have been here, and everyone comes and says yes to this work for whatever reason that they say yes to the work. I'm just grateful that you do. I would like to ask that as we introduce ourselves to each other, that you let us know what brings you to this work, but you have to do it in one sentence. So we have a very large committee. So in order for us to keep to time, one sentence. So I'll model this. My name is Gina Harris. As I mentioned, I'm a graduate of Oak Park. And what brings me to CCB and keeps me engaged in this work is that I've seen our committee really have an impact on things and changes in the district. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm going to pass the talking piece to the person who's right to my right on the screen, which is LeVar, Dr. Ammons.
Thank you, Gina. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. LeVar J. Ammons. I have the honor and privilege of serving District 200 as the Executive Director of Equity and Student Success. And what brings me to CCB is, of course, my work and the work of ensuring that that equity is infused throughout our entire organization, from the board, the Board of Education down to our students, and again ensuring that academic outcomes aren't predictable by race, along with those social outcomes and experiences.
Thank you. And next we're going to pass to Laura.
My name is Laura Hardwick. I had 4 children go through OPRF, finally graduated last year. I also work in criminal defense, and so I just know how essential it is to get climate and discipline and all of these issues right at the very beginning. So I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Laura. Sherilyn.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sherilyn Jones-McLeod. I am the Assistant Director of Campus Safety at OPRF, as well as a parent of a senior. Woohoo! My commitment to CCB goes along with my commitment to advocacy for youth voice and youth empowerment, not only at OPRF, but throughout the city, the state, the world. So that's been my fire for a while.
Thank you, Sherilyn. Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Grimes. I am a social worker, formerly a social worker for the Chicago Public Schools, and currently in private practice here in Oak Park. I had 2 children go through OPRF. My passion is for youth, for their educational outcomes, and for the support that I, as a school social worker, always saw made such a difference to their outcomes, and hoping that I can be a voice here at the CCB.
Thanks, Karen. Lincoln.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lincoln Chandler. Welcome back. I serve as a facilitator for this group, but I've been connected to the OPRF community for about 15 years, going all the way back. And what brings me back is the community, the resilience of this community, and also the impact that I've been able to witness over the time I've been here.
Thanks, Lincoln. Janelle.
I'm Janelle Bishop. I am the lead dean of students at Oak Park and River Forest High School. And what brings me here is, looking for ways to ensure that student involvement in the discipline system of OPRF is not predictable by race.
Thank you, Janelle. And we're all working from home, so no worries about family or animals or noises in the background. We can let all of that go. No worries at all.
Time here.
If my daughter would likely come over. So yeah. Jackie.
Sorry, I was muted. Apologize for not being on video, having some internet issues. I'm Jackie Moore, in my 2nd term on the board, proud mother of 4 OPRF graduates, the youngest of which are now seniors in college. And I have been a longstanding member of CCB and am here this year to show the importance of social justice, racial equity, and in my last hurrah on the board, I am feeling some impatience with our work. So my feeling about being here now is to be about action and going beyond identifying problems.
Thank you, Jackie. Can we stop screen sharing so everyone can see everyone? Calvin.
Hello. Let's see. Hi, my name is Cal Davis. I'm from River Forest. I have a freshman at OPRF, and I was drawn to this committee. I think everyone is equal. Start with a general idea like that, let it branch out, and solve the world's problems.
Thank you so much. And Nisa.
Hi, I'm Nisa Gavin. I am new this year. I'm a psychologist in the special ed department. And I am here because I feel like the work starts right now with building confident, resilient human beings, not just students.
Thank you. David.
Hello, I'm David Waxler, Director of Campus Safety, class of 1985. and I had 3 children who graduated from Oak Park. And I'm in my 3rd year of CCB. And one of the things I enjoy is that we bring things to the table and we work as a collaborative group, and equity is our name, and we try to bring things to people and look at it in a different light. And that's what I really enjoy. And again, I'm David Walkster. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Melanie.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Melanie McQueen, president of Apple, which is African American Parents for Purposeful Leadership and Education. I am also a longstanding member of CCB. I joined simply because of the mission. No matter how great or how bad our school looks on the outside, if we don't get the recipe right for the culture, the climate, and the behavior and what we expect from everyone within the building, it's never going to be what we're working for it to be. And that's why I'm here, because culture, climate, and behavior, it's just so important that we get it right for what it means as a person within the walls of OPRF High School.
Thank you. Joy Lynn.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our new members and welcome back to our returning members. I'm Dr. Joylyn Pruitt-Adams, and I'm the superintendent here at Oak Park and River Forest High School. What draws me to CCB is I see CCB as a change mechanism for the district. The work that we do has brought about so much change. We still have quite a ways to go, but this is the group that gets it done. And it removes the barriers that currently exist for all of our students, but more importantly, our Black and Brown students.
Thank you. Frances.
Hi, everyone. I'm Frances Kraft. I'm a former D97 teacher and had 2 daughters graduate from OPRF, and I'm with the E-team. I find that everything comes back to relationships when we're working in education between family, students, and teachers. And I'm grateful to be back for a 2nd year with CCB because I feel like that relationships are the focus here.
Thank you. Shalima.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Shalima Francois Boo, Executive Director of Special Education. I'm here because I will definitely have to say that I've been termed to be a person who is definitely the one who will bring the invisible to be visible and to bring voice to the voiceless. So I'm here to kind of absorb and learn what the committee has done on part of students and families for OPRF, but also to be a contributor.
Thank you. Kyla.
Hi, I'm Kyla Perales, and I'm a senior. I am back again this year because I want to make sure that future students are able to feel as safe and as welcomed at OPRF as possible, and make sure that we build that community.
Thank you. Roxana.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Roxana Sanders, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. As the administrator in charge of hiring and retaining employees, I truly believe that equity and diversity are the cornerstone of our success. And I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who is back this year and to our new members, because we're all facing a lot of challenges this year that became even more pronounced due to COVID. So we cannot forget about this important work and probably even need to put more effort into it.
Thank you. Quincy.
Hey, I'm Quincy Martin. I'm a senior at OPRF currently. And what brings me here is, I want to have a positive impact on, the community I live in, the school I go to, well, now, the school I go to now. And I also think that, all students should feel safe, living in Oak Park or living in River Forest or going to OPRF. So, yeah.
Thank you. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Spivey. I'm a board member, and I took, was that for a year? I think I took a 1-year hiatus from CCB, but I really missed it, and I wanted to come back. I'm sorry, my kid's watching Power Rangers. But especially this year, given, how difficult an environment we're all living in and all that our students are going through, I wanted to kind of just be a part of this again, and I missed it. So it's great to see everybody.
Thank you. Michelle? Yeah, you might be on delay, Michelle. We can't hear you.
Can you
but
hear
just
me?
Now, there you go. There you go. Yep.
Is that a little bit better?
No, totally now, yes.
Oh, weird. I don't know what's going on. But I am a 6th grade, 7th, 8th grade middle school teacher. I absolutely love middle school kids. Felicia Starks Turner, hello. I have faith. But I'm here because I went to the high school there, graduated in 2000, and has always been enamored with the high school, and also have always been super disappointed in some of my experiences there. And now I'm so hopeful that we're moving towards making some changes for our students of color. And I want to be a part of the conversation and be amongst you guys to help and build and make some real changes that are long lasting.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you. I couldn't tell how the circle was coming around when I saw it. So
I didn't get a chance to go.
yeah.
No, don't worry. I know, Felicia. You came
Oh,
in
I
last
thought you were at the end.
Don't worry. I didn't forget you, Felicia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Johnson, the Associate Superintendent here. This is my 4th year now in the district. And I am doing this work in general because I taught English for 9 years, and it was really clear throughout those, or increasingly clear throughout my 9 years there, that the school systems that I worked in and school systems in general just really didn't work as they were intended to for all students, particularly our students of color. And so I went into administration, and the whole idea that drives me is trying to make the systems that work in the schools more fair for all of our kids, more equitable for all of our kids. And that's what I've been trying to do here at OPRF. This group has been a really valuable thing to be part of because it gives us feedback in ways that we don't otherwise get. It gives us kind of a push as a district that we don't otherwise get without the conversations here. I'm thinking last year, the conversation we had about the DEP, but our behavior education plan for the folks who are new, but also the conversations that we've had on a variety of other topics. So I'm really excited about continuing these conversations this coming year. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. And yeah, Felicia, you came in last, so it's you now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Felicia Starks Turner. I am the Associate Superintendent for Education for Oak Park School District 97. I am here partially, selfishly, because I have a sophomore at OPRF, but also I just have a love for this work. It is very similar to part of my responsibilities in District 97, overseeing student discipline and also being the district's ombudsman. So it's very interesting to me what is happening at the high school since we send our students there, and just excited that this type of work is continuing in District 200 also. So thank you so much for letting me be a part of the group.
Thank you for showing up again. And thank you everyone who came back. Thank you for everyone who's new. I think I got to everyone. I didn't miss anyone. I didn't think so. We wanted to, because there's quite a few new faces on the committee this year, we wanted to give you some information, but before we do that, we need to approve some minutes. Otherwise, Gail will be like on me because I missed something. So, Gail, do I need to move it? Or do you need someone else to move it?
Either way.
I move approval of the minutes from the June 9th, 2020 meeting. Dr.
Second.
Thank you. Do we need a roll for that, Gail, or is it a voice?
A voice vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? None. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We just did our first action, friends. We approved the minutes. How about that? Okay. So I'm going to turn it over now to Lincoln Chandler so he can take you through some of the role and the background of CCB so that you have a more well-rounded picture of what we're about to set out to do. Lincoln? And
Sure.
Hugo, can you put the PowerPoint back up, I think, right? Thank you.
Yes. Awesome. Okay, great. Hi again, everyone. And yeah, I just want to echo what's been said. Thank you so much for coming or returning, however your case may be, to this very important work. Just want to take a couple of minutes just to say a little bit about how we got here. Now, what you see in front of you is the mission of the Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee. There is a web page on the main OPRF website devoted, and it kind of chronicles some of the things that we've done over the past. But I just want to say that even as we heard in the introductions, this is a cross-section of the greater OPRF community. And what's very powerful about this is that it's going to give us an opportunity to see some of these ingrained issues from multiple different directions and get us on one accord and thinking about how do we remove some of these historical barriers. So this committee actually was built off of an existing committee called the Parent Teacher Advisory Committee. Our mission and goal has sort of evolved over the years, so I think it's helpful for folks who are relatively new to this committee to understand where we came from. So once upon a time, this group did come together, but the primary goal was to take a look at the code of conduct and then make changes to it. And then next year, take a look at the code of conduct and make more changes to it. But starting in spring 2016, the idea was that we could go deeper and start to really think not only about consequences associated with discipline, but the routes that different students were taking to get there. So we expanded our scope to take a general review of OPRF's policies and practices to figure out what this would be. So that first full year of CCB was really about defining an explicit focus on what we were going to be. So we started out talking very vaguely about equity and all the different forms of equity, but we decided that it was very important to be very specific and focus on racial equity, as that was one of the kind of most endemic things that we want to get at. So in that first year, it was about figuring out that focus, getting a sense of past initiatives in the district regarding racial equity, and developing that first initial set of recommendations for the board. In year two, we were able to get those recommendations refined and then approved by the board. And the superintendent, I believe that was Dr. Pruitt-Adams' first year around that time, but as she came in as a supporter and a champion of this work, and we were able to kind of continue on by mapping it to the strategic plan and then identifying owners and timelines. So taking it from recommendations to actual concrete deliverables with owners. And so we were adding in accountability under the superintendent's leadership. If you can shift to the next slide. In the 2018-2019 year, that's when implementation became the focus. And we had a couple of milestones for the district where the board moved to adopt a racial equity policy, which was a first. And also we got our first executive director of equity and student success, who you're going to hear more from in a bit. And these were first for the district. So again, these are some of the more tangible institutional changes that the district has been making in response to this work. And last year, we grew the scope even more to say that this is part of our strategic plan, so why not bring those folks together? So we actually absorbed several community members who were involved in strategic plan, and that allowed us to have one conversation. So we weren't talking about school strategy and then talking about racial equity. We started to understand that racial equity lens was the way to think through our strategy. So that integration work really began in earnest in the last year. And among other things, we're able to launch a public data dashboard. And also we, as was mentioned at the top, we're beginning to expand our shift towards restorative practices. And that's led us to revise the code of conduct which was now known as the Behavior Education Plan. Just one more slide. Okay, and so as we move into this year, again, I don't think any of us thought that we'd be doing this remotely, but you know, this organization and this group has been about resiliency and change and evolution. And so as we continue to build, we want to continue our focus on the implementation of this racial equity policy across the full OPRF strategic plan. And again, Dr. Ammons is going to talk to us about this. And the second thing we want to make sure we continue to drive is community building and shared accountability in the wake of this new normal of remote learning, and also in support of our shift towards restorative practices. So even though we're not physically in a building, you know, there's still a need to build community as a prerequisite to have effective restorative practices. And so that's going to continue to be an area of focus. And then also the continued analysis of discipline data and different indicators that we've come up with to understand how the culture and climate is and how it's evolving over time. So if there's any questions about that, I can answer them now, or I can hand it back to Gina.
I have a comment, not a question. Hugo, when you're projecting, I didn't want to interrupt while Lincoln was talking. Can you make it a little bit bigger so that people can really see? Because I'm not sure about everybody's screen, if everybody can read what's on there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure about my eyes. Thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams.
This is Melanie.
Working.
Question? Someone had a question?
Melanie.
Go ahead, Melanie.
I was just hoping that, and I thought we discussed this last year, and I wasn't at the last meeting of last year, but a unit of measure of all the work, measuring from whatever baseline it is that we've agreed upon to make sure that the work we're doing is making an impact by a certain level of measure. And I believe we talked about the REIA tool, but I don't see that in here specifically saying that we're going to measure our areas of focus.
Mm-hmm. I can, okay, go ahead, Dr. Pruitt-Adams.
I was going to say, one of the things that Lincoln mentioned is our focus this year will be on the racial equity work that the district is doing. And throughout the scope of this year, Dr. Ammons will be presenting various components of the racial equity procedure. Each of those components was tied to a metrics of measure. And this is our baseline year. In his presentation today, I think he's going to pinpoint those two key pieces for implementation this year, which is the racial analysis tool and the racial
incident reporting protocol.
Right, so I think your questions will be answered as we move forward over the course of this year. And you will see that there are metrics tied to each component of the procedure.
Yeah, and if I could just add, thank you for that, Melanie. One of the pieces of our work this year is going to be our continued analysis of those metrics, our ongoing looking at it, right? Because a lot of what we discussed last year was like, okay, what is the impact of this, right? This is the policy, what is the impact? So this year we are looking at impact pieces. So that's what those metrics are that Dr. Pruitt-Adams was speaking to. So I will actually turn it over to Dr. Ammons so that he can take us through the report of the equity policy status and the pieces that we'll be looking at. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gina. Hugo, are you able to give me the sharing right so I can share my screen? There'll be quite a bit of navigating in a few slides.
Actually, LeVar, if you just hit share screen, it should give you the option to just grab it. I think I have it set right.
All right, I believe so. And yes, I have it.
Good deal.
All right. Can everyone see what I am currently sharing on my screen?
Yes.
All right, so again, thank you for passing that along, Gina, and thanks for getting me squared away, Chris, with being able to share my presentation. So Without further ado, we can have a conversation tonight about the racial equity policy and the procedure implementation plan. I'm very excited to be at this point. I know that it has been a long time coming for the district in terms of getting us to this point to make our racial equity policy not only being developed, but to make an actual living and breathing document. And we are right at that point now. So we'll get into the presentation here. Tonight's focus or tonight's discussion will be centered around the procedure implementation timeline for the racial equity policy and procedures. In specifics, we'll talk about the racial incident protocol, as there have been a number of racial incidents historically and recently in our school community, which is obviously not exclusive to the OPRF school community, but we do have an opportunity to address these concerns and these levels of disappointment with some fidelity. There's also the racial equity analysis tool that Melanie was just speaking to. We'll dive into that, and that will of course dovetail into the policy section about equitable practices, programs, and procedures, and how our system works for students, and what we can do to mitigate and reduce and eliminate some racial disparities there. And then we'll speak about the equity leadership infrastructure and just the overall efficacy of us being able to realize our plans as we try to move that needle to realizing racial equity. So for our new members, and also not only new to CCB, but new to the institution, just a little background on the racial equity policy. So in September of 2018, the Board of Education approved the framework for a racial equity policy to be developed. In the following year, there were a group of stakeholders, so everyone from administrators, teachers, content experts, parents, students, and so forth came together to create and develop a racial equity policy, which was then adopted in April of 2019. A large part of the work of CCB, as Lincoln had already mentioned, was of course the creation of the racial equity policy, the creation of my position, which came shortly after the adoption of the racial equity policy in April of 2019. And then last year, in my first year, 2019-2020, another group of stakeholders collaborated to then create the procedures for the 12 components of the racial equity policy. And here we are today in the fall of 2020 with our initial implementation plan for the racial equity procedures. And again, just as a refresher of the policy itself, the racial equity policy is comprised of 12 components, just to give folks an idea of what we'll be looking to implement over time in this year and in subsequent years. So the timeline as it stands for our initial implementation for this year. For the fall, we'll be looking at the racial incident protocol. We've already had 2 staff developments on the racial equity or racial incident protocol, excuse me. So people understand how to report a racial incident. There's also the matter of a racial equity or the racial equity analysis tool that'll be used in a number of ways, essentially for us as an institution to keep race at the center of significant decisions that we make. And this tool is designed to do exactly that, to really hone in on that intersectionality of race as we make decisions so we can mitigate the impact or mitigate racial disparities that come about in decision making. And then again, as I said before, that racial equity analysis will dovetail right into equitable practices, programs, and procedures in terms of how we evaluate programs, how we look at the impact that our various programs have on race. And then in the spring of 2020, there, of course, is the annual accountability and monitoring portion of the procedures or policies itself, just so we are keeping tabs on those metrics. And again, in this baseline year, highlighting those pieces and being able to, set some goals for subsequent years around our racial equity work. And then, of course, another evaluation component will be the equity leadership infrastructure in terms of looking at our programming and looking at our racial equity work and making sure we have all the components we need to be as effective as we can, and making sure these programs and this document, being the racial equity policy and those procedures, are certainly living and breathing in our institution from top to bottom. So we'll move on to the racial incident reporting protocol. So I will say in my short time, I've had to deal with and resolve a number of racial instances of racial misconduct here at the school. And you're kind of flying the plane and building it at the same time when you are trying to address and create the system to address these concerns outright. But now I'm excited to say that we have a protocol in place to not only address but to restore any instance of racial misconduct, and very excited to put that into put it to work, and as we have unfortunately already a few times at the start of this school year. So for students and adults, there are 2 different tracks to be able to report an instance of racial misconduct. So for students, they have a total of 4 options that they will have to be able to report a racial incident. Number 1 is coming directly to the Office of Equity in room 372, where myself and my executive assistant, Ms. Melody Brown, will start that fact-finding process, making sure the student is safe physically and emotionally and so forth, and just really beginning to collect our information, communicate with parents, so forth and so on, to come to a resolution. The second option is for a student to tell a trusted adult. They may not be readily available to come down to the Office of Equity, specifically now that we are remote, but being able to go to a trusted adult. That trusted adult then comes to the Office of Equity and gives us that report, and we will go through again that process of documentation, communication, and beginning to ultimately restore that situation. There's an anonymous hotline that is available to students as well, that is on the back of all IDs. So a student could then send a text message to this hotline, which goes to a third-party company. That company then connects or contacts or sends that information over to the deans. Once the deans determine that what they are witnessing in a report is that of a racial incident or racial misconduct, that is then forwarded to the Office of Equity so we can start that process of fact-finding, documentation, communication, and restoration. And then last but not least for students, there is a racial incident reporting form that is online. So this link is actually up and active right now on the public-facing side, as far as student-facing landing pages, as well as our intranet landing pages for faculty and staff. Going over to the adult reporting, adults, it's a similar pathway, being that they have 3 opportunities or 3 different options they can use to report a racial incident, again, coming to the Office of Equity. They can also report to the employee racial incident managers, which are Dr. Roxana Sanders, as well as Mr. Greg Johnson, and then also for teachers, employees, and staff members. There's also the racial incident reporting form. So a part of the communication campaign around the racial incident reporting will be these flyers that you will see here. Can everyone see this flow chart that's up on the screen now? So similar to the sexual harassment reporting protocol, there are a number of flyers and flow charts that are posted all over the school in common areas, restrooms, locker rooms, and so forth. So students know exactly where and how to report an instance of racial misconduct. So as I mentioned earlier, here are the 4 steps. If you are a student, you've experienced an instance of racial misconduct. Here are the 4 ways. Again, reporting to the Office of Equity, telling a trusted adult. There's a 24-hour anonymous tip line or the hotline, and also being able to, again, complete a racial incident reporting form. And with this QR code right here, a student could, or a faculty member or staff could scan this QR code, and it would take them directly to the racial incident reporting form to be filled out. Once that form is filled out and it's submitted, we get an alert in the Office of Equity, and then we begin just that fact-finding process and begin to take care of that situation and take care of the person who reported an incident. On the right-hand side, you see if, as an adult, if a student comes to report an incident of racial misconduct, coming directly to the Office of Equity, or filling out the hitting that QR code to then fill out the incident reporting form. For adults, on the employee-facing side of our landing page, a similar layout, but highlighting those three options. So again, being able to report directly to the Office of Equity, directly to our racial incident response managers for employees, or again, hitting that QR code to fill out that form. And just to give you a visual of the racial incident reporting form on our intranet here, if you scroll down, if I can scroll down, the link is already active here under quick links. So again, it's just a matter of clicking this, and that's on the both the district-facing side, student-facing, and employee-facing sides. Under quick links, folks can go ahead and click that and begin to fill out that form, which will go directly to the Office of Equity for us to then go into action around addressing an event. So then when we think about our response to racial misconduct, when we think about our racial incident response team, which again is the Office of Equity, there's the adult racial incident report or responding managers, in addition to the deans who will help us in this fact-finding process. But number one, we receive all complaints regarding racial misconduct. So we want folks to understand, where they can go, how they can access the information to make these reports, because ultimately we'll be able to house all of these reports as data to see where these incidents happen, how they happen, who are they happening to, so then we can put plans at a macro level together on how to better address what's happening in the institution relative to racial misconduct. Secondly, we want to ensure that the reporting party and the responding party have access to school and community resources. Being a part of these, fact-finding processes and dealing with people who are going through these moments of racial misconduct on either side, there's certainly some psychological distress that folks are experiencing during this time. So being sure that they have access to counselors, social workers, community resources to make sure they are emotionally taken care of. We're going to ensure that that happens for anyone involved in reporting incident. Thirdly, we want to ensure the reporting party has guidance on how to contact campus safety or law enforcement if that's appropriate, if that's a need. We'll certainly point folks in the direction of those resources. The next one, just conduct a fact-finding process that is not only prompt, but done in an equitable manner. So that's when we will lean in with our deans and partner and collaborate with them in terms of trying to find out exactly what happened, how it happened, and just gathering all the facts so we can make our decision on what needs to happen next. And that leads into number 5. So determining whether or not a complaint is substantiated. So are we looking at an instance of explicit, malicious racial misconduct? Or are we looking at an instance of racial disconsciousness, right? Being able to discern the two are critically important as we think about how we want to dole out consequences for what has happened. And then next is just informing the reporting party of any outcomes to the extent possible. So knowing full well we can't disclose consequent or discipline information, but of course, folks who have been impacted by racial misconduct or a racial incident, we can assure them that we've done all that we can do and need to do to ensure that justice has been brought to that situation. And then we want to make sure we follow up with both parties, give them some time to process what has happened, and being able to, again, go back, follow up, and make sure everyone is doing well emotionally, physically, and so forth. So then there's the matter of racial healing. So when we talk about that discernment, right, of are we dealing with a malicious, racial attack or racial misconduct versus racial disconsciousness, there's still a level of healing that has to happen. And we've talked a number of times about this, and it's been mentioned here tonight already that we are continuously working to be a more restorative institution in our practices. So when we're talking about racial healing, of course, we want to focus on restoration, and we've done that in a number of ways. So in the times that I have had to navigate these situations, I've been able to partner with our care team leaders, racial equity coaches, our current circle keepers through the training with Umoja to do peace circles, not only in classrooms, but who've been impacted by an instance of racial misconduct, but sitting down and doing face-to-face work with a reporting party and a responding party, whether that be with students, parents, teachers, and so forth. We find that to be critical in this process to make sure we bring some sort of healing or restoration to the situation before we turn students and teachers and so forth back over into their everyday grind of just working through their daily and weekly school activities. Another piece as far as restoration that has been pretty impactful for us has been impact letters. Of course, in the restoration process, people who have been impacted by harm or racial harm may not be in a space to sit down and speak with someone who has offended them in such a way. So there has been the use of impact letters where their reporting party will write an impact letter that will then be read to the responding party, the person who or the group that committed the racial misconduct or committed the harm. That impact letter from that person will be read to them, and they can process through that letter, again, with a racial equity coach, with myself, with a circle keeper, just so they can understand the impact of their actions in hopes of them not, doing that again or acting in that way again. And of course, reconciliation through apology is another way to bring about healing. Although we've used all of these highlighted points here, this is not to say these are the only or the end all be all to that work of racial healing, but these are just some of the things that have been done to this point in the racial healing component of this procedure. So then moving on to disciplinary action. So of course, restoration can be a consequence and also a healing property in these situations. But when we talk about the 3 bullet points you see there, racial misconduct in its explicit and again, malicious form, also retaliation from someone who is alleged to have committed racial misconduct or even intentionally dishonest complaints. These can be subject to disciplinary action. And this is a part of that fact-finding collaboration, again, with the Office of Equity, the employee racial incident response managers, as well as the deans, as we kind of work through the fact-finding that will lead us to whether we need to be to give specific disciplinary actions, or if we need to move on to a more, or in addition to a restorative approach. So in terms of students and employees, when it comes down to these 3 bullet points, for students, action, of course, will be taken in accordance with the behavior education plan, and for employees, action is taken in accordance with board policy as it relates to disciplinary action. So moving on to the racial equity analysis tool. So this tool, again, it is designed to provide us as educational leaders, teachers, and so forth to use common language and protocol when we are considering making our decisions that really focus on the intersectionality of race in those decisions. So before we even begin to utilize this tool, we have to establish what kind of decision needs to be made, who is going to be a part of that team of stakeholders to then spearhead that decision, and then ultimately complete the racial equity analysis tool form. Within that form, we have 4 steps and a total of 10 questions. And those questions are circled around ensuring racial equity, making sure we are setting what are the desired racially equitable outcomes and how are we going to identify and engage stakeholders in this conversation. Of course, we need to be data driven and be able to review data in order to inform our decisions. and then evaluate success indicators, metrics, and so forth, and find out what we learned and where can we grow, in decisions around servicing students and families and community. So we'll take a look at the racial equity analysis tool. And again, as I mentioned, it's broken up into 4 parts, but if we're looking to make a department, or we're making a decision, or if there is a program evaluation or review, you would start here with just kind of demographic information. Whom is the facilitator, the department, professional development in the use of this tool is critical. So we want to know, has there been any recent professional development in this tool? And if so, when was the last time you received that professional development? There's also the delivery of who is a part of the committee, who's making the decision, who's leading the decision for this group. Are we making a new decision? Are we reviewing a policy, a procedure, a program? And then here we have a list of the type of decisions that can be made relative to operating here in our school. And then we'll need a short description of what this decision is, what this evaluation or proposed decision will be. And then what are the expected outcomes for the proposal? You can see here the number of students that are impacted and what are the approximate associated costs and funding sources. As we think about resource allocation, we want to be mindful of that. So the first step, again, we want to ensure racial equity. So these first questions, these first 3 questions are specific to, who is being advantaged or disadvantaged by a proposed decision, program, decision, whatever the case may be. How has this proposed decision how's it going to actively address any existing racial disparities that exist within our school community? And what are the present potential negative impacts that are produced or could be produced by this decision that is being made? Our second step in this process is, understanding what are the outcomes or desired outcomes and identifying the stakeholders. How are we going to identify who needs to be at the table? So again, what are the desired racially equitable outcomes related to this decision being made? How are we going to identify and engage groups that are potentially advantaged or disadvantaged by this decision? And are we going to bring in those racially underrepresented voices to be included in the dialogue relative to the work that we're trying to do and filter through this tool? Our third step, data review. So we want to know what data has been collected and analyzed to determine the impact of the proposed decision or program evaluation and so forth. And how has leadership intentionally informed stakeholders about the data review that will impact this decision. And then lastly, again, there's the evaluative piece. So how will we evaluate and be accountable for making sure that this decision ensures racial equity for stakeholders? We also want to know about what resources are needed to make a change. What are the next steps, as you work through this form? So those are the 4 steps for the racial equity analysis tool. So then our policy section on equitable practices, programs, and procedures speaks to our grants, multi-tier systems of supports, professional development, curriculum and instruction, educational technology, and all the programs that exist within those sub areas there. And the plan is, or the implementation plan is to, when we talk about program reviews and evaluations, these programs will be filtered through the evaluation process themselves will be aligned with the racial equity analysis tool. And all those questions that you saw will be brought to each one of these areas in terms of rolling out programming underneath these programs. And then our equity leadership infrastructure is an annual review just to evaluate our equity leadership infrastructure. So again, we have 12 components in our racial equity policy. There's a lot of moving parts there. So we have to be sure that we have the infrastructure and the personnel in place to bring about this document, again, being a living and breathing document in our institution. So once that review is done at the end of the year, we can begin to look at our system and see if there's a need for leadership acquisition. What are considerations for infrastructure, PD, or professional development needs, or various activity proposals that can, again, make us more effective in delivering the work we need to do to, again, actualize or come to a place of racial equity. So with that, I will leave it to the CCB for any questions. I'm sure we have some, and yeah, happy to field those.
Yeah, thanks, LeVar. I am going to open it up for the committee to ask questions. I have a slew of questions, but I will. But I want to hear from the committee.
I have a ton, but I don't want it to be too crazy. So this is just asking the questions. This is not necessarily looking for the answer at this moment. But I do have quite a few. So the first question that I have, and again, this is Melanie with Apple. And I forgot to mention, I do have a freshman here this year. So I have been receiving communication, and this is partly where my questions are coming from as a parent as well. I love everything that I've heard thus far. However, the first thing that I'm always looking for is layman's terms and understanding that's easy for students and parents and the OPRF community to understand. And I was looking for, have we actually, outside of our policy and procedure, I know we've extensively created definitions within our policies. However, have we defined racial incident for our community, for OPRF, as it is understood? And then is it also a different definition from a person filing a racial incident and from filing a grievance? That's the first question, because you are able to file a grievance as well. The second is there a criteria for racial incident? I heard extensively how you're going to make the discernment after it's been reported, but again, are we explaining these are the things that we're that means it has been a racial incident, or we're just taking whatever that person is feeling? Something that I heard was you're offended. People can be offended by anything. So are we having people come to the office simply because they were, or not simply, that's not the right thing to say, because they were offended, or because they are, and this is just going to be a learning process for them, or we're clearly outlining what a racial incident consists of in all levels. The next is, will this data that we're collecting of people now reporting a racial incident versus a grievance, if there is going to be a difference, is that going to be part of the outward facing data tool for the communities to also see how many reports have been made? Or is that something that's only going to be internal as we're rolling out something very, very new? The next one is, our counselors are part of this infrastructure as they're checking in with our students about what they're experiencing this year. You know, if they feel they need to utilize or even understand what a racial incident is, and if they need any guidance through experiencing something and they have no idea how to make this report, or comfortable, a level of comfortability to make this report. And our counselors are part of this in making sure that students are comfortable in talking about race and what they're experiencing, because they may not even understand that this is something that they should be reporting. And then lastly, are we going to survey the people, the teachers, the students, whomever that has made a report, and finding out if they felt their issue or report was taken seriously, if they felt that the outcome that happened was the outcome that they were looking for, and if not, are they able to say what they expect the outcome to be? I think for a few years now, we've talked about transparency. So letting the community know this is something that we're doing and something that we're serious about. In my head, I'm looking at more messaging, you know, when people come into the school, they understand right away, this is not something that we take lightly, and this is what our community is able to do. But I don't think we also take seriously how the community feels when they don't feel like they've been heard, or they don't feel like their issue has been handled the way that they feel it should have been handled. And not that that's how it's going to be handled, but to get that feedback and understanding of, you know, what people are looking for when they file something like this, I think is something that would be helpful to discuss at a round table for the following year of what it is we're doing to combat this. So those are my questions.
Okay, so I will look to tackle those. Starting first with, you mentioned the definition of racial incident. What is a racial incident, correct?
Right. The question is, has that definition been defined for students to understand? Do they know what that means? Is that something that we've rolled out to our students?
So in the communication campaign, actually, it has not gone out or reached students as of yet. There are several definitions of what a racial misconduct or instance of racial misconduct could be that are listed specifically in the procedure of the policy itself. But in terms of me sitting down with Karen Sullivan to talk about, again, the messaging and how do we then convey this for students in a way that is digestible, right, for them, so they can understand, okay, well, what that is, and then how do I report that communication is being put together currently, so we can roll that out to not only students, but to continued enrollment out to staff, as well as the parents, so they can understand, you know, how this process works to report a racial incident. I believe, did I answer your question there?
Yeah, it hasn't been done yet. Because to me, this is a campaign, no different than.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Go ahead.
For sure. As far as the data tools, so we've had some conversations around data collection. We haven't spoken specifically to the data dashboard and having that accessible, but we can certainly, you know, open that door and have that conversation. But in terms of the data that will be collected in the Office of Equity would be once the racial incident reporting form is filled out, and again, it doesn't have to be necessarily filled out by the student, adult, teacher, and so forth, because any racial incident that comes into the Office of Equity, that racial incident reporting form is going to be filled out. Let's say a student just shows up with something. We'll have to fill out that form anyway, and once that form is filled out, it creates a file that will be stored both physically and electronically, so we can again be able to sort and understand, you know, what type of situations are we seeing? Are we seeing any instances of racial misconduct in a specific, you know, area or program or department or whatever the case may be? So we can take that macro approach to addressing those pieces. But as far as the data dashboard, we haven't had those conversations as of yet. And then to speak to the counselors. So I was in communication with counselors recently around not the tools, not the reporting protocol specifically, but technology issues and concerns. But you bring up a great point to make sure counselors are aware of making students comfortable, right? And knowing that they should make this report. And also, I would say that our counselors are likely to be a trusted adult to a lot of our students, right? So a lot of these things land possibly in the counselor's office, who will then, of course, report it to the Office of Equity. So of course, there'll be more communication. And to your point, Melanie, this is a campaign, right? So constantly giving people the information on how to not only report, but also, you know, make students aware and comfortable as to, you know, how to go about this process, and, you know, if they should report something. And then the surveying of teachers, and folks who have been impacted by a racial incident, just about the process and their experience in that. We've talked about kind of an exit slip of sorts about the process itself, so we can have that data stored as well. But again, that's still in a phase of development for those questions.
And then the difference of this and filing a grievance. Or because is it still going to be two separate things, or?
You know what, I will defer now to either Roxana or Greg, if you want to speak to the grievance component, if you could, please.
The distinctions between a racial equity incident and something that would just fall into the category of a regular grievance, is that correct?
Right, yeah. Is that being explained to our community as well? These are two separate things. You can still file a grievance, but it's not the same as racial incident. Because my concern is that you start getting all these racial incident things and it really is a grievance, or vice versa, because people don't understand the difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes good sense. As far as understanding the distinctions between that internally, yes, something that we will make sure we have to keep an eye on. It's a good call. But you're asking specifically, are we sending this out to the community so they're aware of the distinction between these processes, particularly for our students when that comes about. So yeah, we'll have to fold that into our communications when we roll that out. Thanks for that.
I just wanted to add that there is necessarily not a strict distinction between the two. And the reason being that, you know, for any reason, somebody could file a grievance using the uniform grievance procedure. We encourage everything to be first resolved informally. But for any reason that any sort of complaint that anybody could have, they can still follow that procedure. So we don't want it to discourage people necessarily from engaging in that process if they feel that they've exhausted other avenues and they still didn't get the resolution.
Oh, for sure. I see parents doing both. I mean, I see them looking at this as another level of expressing their not just their concern, but their unhappiness with how things are being handled. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going through every single avenue. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make it public too. So that's what, you know.
Part of the role of going through the tool, though, is under Dr. Ammon's work. He will be able to discern if it should be a grievance that's forwarded to the Office of Human Resources if a parent does the racial incident protocol, and vice versa. That also will then serve as a learning component for the person filing the grievance when they are told this is really a racial incident that will be handled here, or this is really a grievance that will be handled here.
Do we have more questions or comments? Francis.
Dr. Ammons, thank you for your presentation. I only had one question about, is there a plan for professional development for all teachers across the district on restorative practices so they know how to build community in their classroom with their students? Because a lot of this, I know it's specifically about infractions and how you repair harm, but I'm wondering about a focus on how you build that community in the first place in a classroom.
Yeah, I know that we've, and thank you for your question, Francis. I know that we've done quite a bit of work with Umoja and having, I want to say, our 23, 25 teachers and faculty members go through the process of becoming resident circle keepers or advanced circle keepers. So it's a matter of now, how do we then leverage those folks to then be able to provide training for the rest of our staff to, again, make our restorative practices ubiquitous in the institution.
I want to also add that beginning last school year, we surveyed our staff in conjunction with some of our school improvement initiatives, our curriculum work, and some other things. And we're able to identify 4 key topics that needed to drive our professional development moving forward. One was assessment work, and all these are, I'm not going to unpack them all right now, but one is assessment work, one is culture responsive pedagogy, and one of them is also, of course, creating, as we talk about it here, through some initiatives that Linda Parker has put together, the culture of warmth that we want in each classroom, which is centered around restorative practices. We've already delivered professional development to actually on both our second day back on August 18th or 17th, my exact date's gone, and also in this past Friday. We provided sessions on both those. And we plan to continue that as a common theme every time we move through PD in the district. So we have a lot of work to do, but we have the space to make it a consistent part of how we function.
Also want to add that in addition to that, this focus for first semester, and especially the first quarter, is built on building that sense of connectedness between our teachers and students. And we recently did a thought exchange where we asked our students for feedback on that. Were they feeling connected to their teachers? And what could we do differently?
Thank you. That's all great.
I would just add along with that, in terms of being able to report out to the Office of Equity, if somebody actually has a positive interaction that they want to share, that could become a best practice or some, so that everything's not only punitive, but there's an opportunity to take that information in as well.
Sure.
We're getting pretty close to time, but if there are other committee member questions?
I had a quick question, and it doesn't have to be answered tonight, but I was hoping to see in the presentation with the racial equity analysis tool. I'm still not clear how it's going to be used. So if there was a way to, LeVar, if you could provide an example of like what's one of the things you're going to start with and who's going to be working on it and what metrics will be collected so that we have some sense of if this is a tool that's going to work for us.
Sure, and currently right now I've been working with Christopher Thiem and his team in educational technology around the big ideas in tech. And really that's surrounding, and Chris, help me out if I'm not landing correctly on this, but it's around the digital citizenry and also information and digital literacy and how that's rolled out to our students and how that may potentially play out racially. So we are filtering the decisions of what is going to be rolled out to students and staff for these big ideas in technology through the racial equity analysis. There's also the matter of
I'm sorry, LeVar, I'm just in terms of that one, what does it mean? What's the racial equity aspect of the digital citizen? What's your lens on that?
My lens on that is, and maybe Chris, you can jump in as well, and we've talked a little bit about this, but then, how do again, the dissemination of that information of digital literacy, or even what it means to be digitally literate, lands with various students. So for instance, with emails and communication, right? It's known that some of our ways of communicating with students, particularly through email, may not land or emails may not be checked. So what ways are we looking to communicate with students digitally to disseminate information is just one thing. We've discovered that, again, with some of our lower performing students who may also be Black or brown students, we understand that those forms of communication may not necessarily work for them. So what are we doing to then ensure that we are able to connect with those students in a digital sense? It's just one example in that realm.
Do you mind if I give an example of something that we encountered as we were working through this? Just for example, on the term of literacy and how loaded that term in itself could be. And so even looking at the terms we were using to categorize the areas of focus for digital citizenship, it opened up a lot of questions and a lot of thought and a lot of scrutiny on some things that we were taking for granted through the process. So it's just scratching the surface on what it means, but even applying it to technology, there's a big impact in how it affects what we put into our planning work to bring this forward, so that we're not excluding groups in the process of bringing it forward. But I hope that speaks to some of what you're trying to get at, Dr. Ammons.
Yes.
That's helpful. That's helpful. We're almost at time. I want to, Chris, what you just shared, that's what we want to hear, right? Like, so how did you take it apart? what was the impact on what changes were made to what was done so that the impact to the students was different. That's what we want to hear. Thank you, Dr. Ammons, for your report. I want to let the committee know that all of our meetings, very few of our meetings will be where we get a long report and then we have a little bit of time for questioning. We spend, this committee spends a fair amount of time actually doing some work together. So it's you know, you all know I'm a teacher, so we will be doing like way more interactive. We have yet to figure out how to do the small group online, but with an Open Meetings Act business here. But your input as we move through these pieces and processes together is going to be really valuable. So what I would love to encourage us to do, and especially because, thank you, Dr. Ammons, like there's a lot of information in that report. And I'm really interested, I have a lot more questions about the racial equity analysis tool and the infrastructure. I'd love to see a little bit more about that. So what I would encourage the committee to do as we wrap up tonight is to take a look at that report, see what additional questions might be, you know, because what we're wanting to, what our committee is going to be responsible for providing is feedback on to the school board, right, to the board around these metrics that they've laid out here. So if there are pieces of that report that might beg for additional questions, I would love for the committee to be able to discuss that as we move into our next meeting. So I want to thank you again. I'm sorry, someone say my name.
Yes, I was wondering, is there a way for us to share our questions outside of this meeting space? Because it's a lot to take in and then try and, you know, gather.
Totally. Can you, Gil, is it okay with OMA if they send their questions directly to you? We just can't share them all together, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you have questions that come up, please send them directly to Gail.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that would be
Gina,
Yes.
Gina, this is Janelle.
Hey, Janelle.
Could I just say one thing that I really want to put on everyone's minds as we leave?
Please do, go right ahead.
So when we talk about the racial equity work that we're looking to do, and thinking specifically when a child commits some act of racial misconduct against another. And I have to also be thinking about our desire to be more restorative, the culture of warmth that we're looking to build, the desire to be less punitive in our responses. And in my experience, when someone commits a pretty terrible racial act, calling terrible names, you know what I mean, there is often a desire for a very heavy punitive response. And that is not in keeping with what we are saying that we are looking to do as a school community in terms of reacting to acts of misbehavior. And so I just want to put that on everyone's mind because of the hurt and pain often caused by these acts of racial misconduct, that while we are educating our young people and helping them learn and grow from these mistakes, the desire can also be to, you know, string them up by their fingernails in the hallway. And so with acts of racism, that is often the desire because it is so painful. I just want us to be thinking about both things and remembering that we are truly trying to be restorative and less punitive in our work.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, Janelle, because a large part of us as a community transitioning to being restorative means that we have to actually be thinking about how are we doing all of these things differently and how are we having those conversations. And in LeVar's report, there was a fair amount of disciplinary conversation in there, which would be something that I would love for us to talk about further. But I don't want to keep people beyond the commitment of the time that they've already set aside for us. But it is such a valuable point that part of our work is going to be in educating our community in understanding what does it mean to truly be restorative, because you know, and that eye for the eye thing still, there's a lot of a belief that's still held that way. And we, you know, but there's another piece that I want to just toss into our conversation now as we're thinking about this is prior to us moving into disciplinary action there, and Francis touched on it a piece, because what came up for me was how are we being preemptive of how are we being preventative, right? What kind of relationships are being built so that people feel as though this is not the place that's faced, or is it ever warranted or accepted that racial incidences happen, right? So there's some preemptive pieces of conversation that I would love for us to have, but honestly, I'm just so grateful that we have such an amazing committee that's willing to show up and continue this work. So as I said, if you have questions or any feedback or anything like that, please email Gail and copy me actually, because that way I want to make sure that we get all the information. And I really do, I'm looking forward to hearing from you all, but because of us being a Public Open Meetings Act, we want to make sure that we don't violate any of the stipulations of that. Dr. Pruitt-Adams, did you want to add anything?
I just want to thank everyone. Your questions were good, and we want to hear more questions because this is going to be an ongoing conversation. That's going to be our focus of our work for this year. And so we need your feedback in order for us to move forward. But I also want to thank Janelle for her comment, as did you. It was right on point, and it kind of brings us back to why we do this work in the first place.
Yes, exactly. We're here for real change. It's not easy, right? But thank you all so much for your time tonight. It's 8:05. I'll do my best to not go over next time, you. Okay. Have a great week.
We need a first and a second to adjourn, Jean.
Oh yeah, we need to move to adjourn. Someone.
Second. Melanie seconds.
Thank you, Melanie. Thanks, Gail, for the reminder. You know.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night.
You too. Nice to see everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wear a mask.
Thanks, Cal. Yes.